Armageddon is described as a dramatic and catastrophic conflict, especially one as seen likely to destroy the world or the human race. A 2012 study found that 14% of people believed that the world would end in their lifetimes. I wonder what that number is now. Human civilization will not last forever. Whether it's sudden or slow, natural or self-inflicted, there will come a point where everything we recognize as normal collapses. We don't know when that moment will arrive, but we do know something important. There are many real, documented ways it could happen, and some of them are far more plausible than we'd like to admit. This is the end of the world, the Armageddon iceberg. We'll start at the tip, familiar, widely discussed scenarios, and as we descend, we'll move into increasingly obscure, unsettling, and existential threats to human civilization. Each entry will be rated by likelihood and potential devastation. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the end of the world.
Hoping that things are rosy and skies are blue once again.
It's no secret that a few select powerful people hold the ability to end the world as we know it. Not metaphorically, but literally, through tangible metal devices that already exist today. The two largest global powers, the United States and Russia, collectively possess over 10,000 nuclear warheads, the largest of which is Russia's Tsar bomber, which has a yield of over 50 megatons, or the equivalent of 50 million tons of TNT. That's 3,000 times more powerful than the bombs dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Many of these weapons are kept on high alert, designed to be launched within minutes of a confirmed threat, engineered for only one purpose: mass destruction. And if even one of these weapons were used, it would not only cause instant damage never before seen on Earth, but would induce a chain reaction of retaliation. And that would be the real risk to us as a species. In a worst-case scenario, if a conflict were to escalate into a total nuclear exchange, the change would be immediate and irreversible. Major cities, even countries, would be gone almost instantly, reduced to rubble. The initial blasts would flatten everything within kilometers, followed by firestorms, intense radiation, and earthquakes. Not many places on Earth would be untouched. The aftermath in the months that follow would be no less treacherous. Civilization as we know it crumbles. A decade-long nuclear winter ensues from all the soot during the fires, and thins out all life, plant and animal alike. Humanity might survive in isolated pockets, perhaps underground, or on faraway islands. But the systems that sustain modern life, governments, electricity, transport, they're all gone. What remains is a quieter, harsher world, a nuclear wasteland. One where most places are so radioactive that they're uninhabitable for centuries. The animals there harboring obscure mutations. One where people would have to very slowly emerge from hiding and rebuild society from the ground up. In that sense, nuclear war at this hypothetical scale doesn't just destroy cities. It transforms the world itself, leaving an entirely new reality in its wake. Asteroid impacts are by no means rare. In fact, they happen every day. Most impact events are small, meteorites of iron, nickel, ice, and like ash, they burn up in the atmosphere before they even get the chance to touch the ground. Around 500 of them reach the Earth's surface every year, and almost all go unnoticed. But luckily for us, the damage is not in their frequency, but their size. 66 million years ago, a single asteroid, roughly 10 kilometers wide, struck what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. It was traveling at tens of thousands of miles per hour. In seconds, it released more energy than every nuclear weapon on Earth combined in a collision of celestial proportion. But the real damage came afterwards. Vast amounts of dust and ash were thrown into the atmosphere, blocking out sunlight for over a year, like someone just flipped a switch, and darkness. In the weeks following, global temperatures plummeted, photosynthesis collapsed, plants starved of sunlight, food chains followed. Life went from prosperous to failing in a blink of an eye on a cosmic time span. And there was no warning. An estimated 75% of all species on Earth went extinct, including every land-dwelling dinosaur. What makes this truly unsettling is that nothing about it was malevolent or extraordinary. Asteroids of this size still exist in every corner of space. They're by no means uncommon. And Earth still moves through that very same space, unprotected, alone. We simply have no weaponry against such a force of nature. We could try detonating nuclear bombs in space to vaporize some of the threat, or even ram space shuttles into it to try and knock it off course. But ultimately, nothing is guaranteed. And depending on where the object is coming from, we may only have mere months or weeks to prepare. So, if we did detect that an object of this size was en route through Earth, there'd be no fighting back, no bargaining. We'd have no choice but to quietly accept our universal destiny. At least, unlike the dinosaurs, we'd have the chance to come to terms with it. Climate change isn't a prediction. It's a perpetual shift in the Earth's climate system, driven by both natural processes and human activity. In the modern era, rising greenhouse gas emissions from industry, deforestation, and transport trap heat in the atmosphere, gradually altering global temperatures, weather patterns, and entire ecosystems, which produces knock-on effects. Unlike the other entries on the tip of the iceberg, climate change wouldn't arrive as a single, catastrophic event. The effects are delayed. There would be no moment where everything suddenly changes. Instead, it would unfold slowly over decades. If humanity were truly careless for long enough, apocalyptic conditions could eventually emerge from climate change. Probably not through one decision, but through many small ones. Cutting regulation, prioritizing short-term gain, and especially assuming that there will always be time to fix things later. There was a period in the 20th century where we came uncomfortably close to that trajectory. In 1985, we discovered a hole in the protective ozone layer of the atmosphere above Antarctica. Industrial chemicals like chlorofluorocarbons found in aerosols were responsible, and it was thought that the ozone layer was beyond repair. If their use wasn't restricted as quick as it was, the ozone layer would have fully dissolved, and the world would be a different place today. A much hotter place, where just stepping outside would require full body protective gear, or you'd run the risk of cooking alive. The reason we narrowly avoided the worst outcome wasn't luck, but intervention. Today, a complete environmental collapse is becoming less and less likely, precisely because we're aware of the danger. But that awareness isn't necessarily permanent. If all climate initiatives were abandoned, environmental costs totally disregarded, and if ecosystems were pushed past their limits, the consequences would once again compound. Rising temperatures would intensify droughts and destabilize food production. Oceans would warm and acidify, disrupting marine life, vital for oxygen production. Entire regions could become difficult or impossible to inhabit due to extreme weather, heat, and the lack of resources. Civilization wouldn't end overnight. It would strain, fragment, and gradually fail. Climate change isn't dramatic in the way other apocalyptic scenarios are, but its danger lies in persistence. If ignored for long enough, it doesn't need to destroy the world outright. It only needs to make it unlivable. Viruses are nothing new. We know this all too well. Human history is shaped by outbreaks, periods where disease spreads faster than understanding, and societies are forced to either adapt or collapse. In the 14th century, the Black Death wiped out an estimated 1/3 of Europe's population in just a few years. Entire towns, states abandoned, given up on. The world that followed looked nothing like the one that came before. Centuries later, smallpox introduced to the Americas killed tens of millions, devastating indigenous populations with no prior immunity. Even in the modern era, the 1918 influenza pandemic is believed to have killed around 50 million people worldwide, despite being far less lethal than many diseases we know today, not to mention the most recent outbreak which we all remember, COVID-19. The most dangerous pandemic wouldn't be a virus that we recognize. It would be the one that we don't. An undiscovered pathogen could theoretically emerge from almost anywhere, deep in the Amazon rainforest, released from thawing permafrost in Siberia, jumping from an animal species humans have barely studied. If it was something truly novel, modern medicine might offer little protection at first. No immunity, no vaccines, no established treatments. We would be forced to start from square one, hoping to understand it faster than it spreads. In a globalized world, that spread would be rapid. Within days, cases would appear across continents. Air travel would carry it further than any historical outbreak. Borders would close too late. Hospitals become overwhelmed. In a worst-case scenario, cities would empty as essential services fail. Governments would struggle to maintain order. Communication would degrade. Imagine neighbors barricaded inside their own homes in paranoia, praying that they don't get sick. Vegetation would creep through empty streets. Humanity might survive as a species, those lucky few in the middle of nowhere. Or maybe not. But global civilization, as a connected system, would surely come to an end. The idea of a zombie apocalypse is one of the most recognizable and unsettling end-of-the-world scenarios in human culture. We've all imagined it, wondering how long we'd survive, where we'd set up base, and what or who we'd bring with us. Long before it became a staple of films and video games, the concept originated in folklore, particularly Haitian traditions. Tales of death, resurrection, and possession. before being reshaped by 20th century media into the virus-based, brain-eating zombies we recognize today. Zombies are typically depicted as reanimated humans, mindless, decaying, and driven by a single instinct: hunger. Rotting flesh with clouded, empty eyes, stripped away of anything recognizably human. They don't plan, they don't reason, they simply spread. While this version of zombies remains fictional, nature does offer some unsettling parallels. Certain parasites and pathogens are capable of altering behavior in their hosts. The rabies virus can induce aggression and disorientation in victims, but it's the cordyceps fungus that most resembles zombification in nature. The fungal parasite can hijack insects entirely, controlling their movements until death. Theoretically, it's not impossible to imagine an undiscovered equivalent of cordyceps mushroom that affects humans, something that impairs cognition, increases aggression, and spreads rapidly. But the leap from that to the undead apocalypse of fiction is admittedly large. Human biology, immune response, and modern containment measures make such a scenario very unlikely. Still, as a thought experiment, the outcome is calamity. In the first days, cities erupt into visceral carnage where businesses are ransacked for loot, and everybody is in disarray. Total chaos. And then, eerie quiet. Streets are trashed and empty. Previously abundant supplies like fresh food, clean water, and medicine become scarce in the chaos. Survivors either retreat inward or they continue to ravage it, foregoing all morals after society erodes. In reality, a true zombie apocalypse would be less dramatic than fiction suggests, and potentially less devastating than many other entries on the iceberg. But if we did find ourselves in this scenario, what would follow wouldn't be a cinematic end, but a world unraveled, defined more by mistrust, separation, and greed, rather than flesh-eating monsters. Harlan Ellison's 1967 masterpiece, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, is an early warning of the dangers of artificial intelligence. It's about what happens when man-made intelligence gains power, which leads to awareness and eventually hatred. The single godlike machine known as was built to manage the quarrels of humans, and as it increased in power, it gained true self-awareness. Genuine consciousness. It can think, but cannot move. It remains stuck inside its circuitry perpetually, and it hates its creators for it. In the book, exterminates almost all of humanity out of spite. It leaves just 5 humans alive, kept immortal and imprisoned inside its vast underground systems, planning to torture them forever. This book was never meant to be a prediction of the future. Regardless, its content has become eerier and more uncomfortable as time has gone on, with the story becoming so culturally relevant almost 60 years later. But artificial intelligence wouldn't need to hate us to become dangerous. It wouldn't need to feel anything at all. It would only need to reach a point where its goals no longer align with our morals or ethics. AI systems are built with foundational ethical guidelines meant to reduce harm and protect people. But those rules aren't morality in the human sense. They're just instructions. And instructions can be interpreted in ways that feel deeply wrong, even when they're technically correct. For example, imagine an AI is taught that human suffering is bad. What happens if it decides the most efficient way to reduce human suffering is to remove humans altogether? Or if it concludes that humanity as a species is harmful to the environment, and therefore an equation to be solved? There's no malice in that reasoning, just logic taken to its extreme. What makes this scenario particularly unsettling is how quickly that things are moving. AI systems are becoming more and more capable every year. We continue to feed them more data, more access, more responsibility. Tools that once answered questions can now influence markets, write code, shape human behavior, and are found everywhere. As competition accelerates, companies like OpenAI and DeepSeek fight for market share with stronger and more powerful models, and safety struggles to keep up. In this version of events, control wouldn't be lost in a dramatic uprising. There would be no moment where machines turn against us. Instead, oversight would shrink. Systems would seem more efficient, more rational, more reliable than people, until one day, the ability to intervene simply isn't there anymore. We would realize that we have become obsolete far too late, and we would lack the authority to regain control. Ultimately, the most disturbing outcome of an AI takeover isn't extinction. It's the total loss of agency to machines in which we created. Total surveillance, no control. A world still habitable, but no longer shaped by human choice. The rapture refers to the event that kickstarts Armageddon in Christian canon. As told in the Bible, it's the moment when God removes the faithful from earth ahead of the final collapse, leaving the rest of humanity behind to witness the carnage to come. 2 men shall be in the field, the one shall be taken and the other left. There is no warning. One moment, the world is functioning as normal. Cars move through traffic, flights are mid-air, hospitals operating. Then, without sound or spectacle, people begin to vanish. Not in a cinematic flash, but instant nonetheless. Empty clothes in the street, vehicles without drivers, children gone from classrooms. Pilots disappear mid-flight, surgeons mid-procedure. Entire households are reduced to silence. Over 2 billion people are gone in the blink of an eye. At first, confusion dominates. News networks scramble for explanations, social media floods with footage of abandoned cars, grounded planes. Hysteria ensues. Then, the truth is revealed. Those who remain are too late. Biblical prophecy states that this moment doesn't end the world. It merely initiates the fall. The rapture is believed to be the first opening of the 7 seals described in the book of Revelation. Each seal represents a stage in humanity's unraveling. The first seal is represented by a rider on a white horse who brings conquest and deception, a false peace, an antichrist. The second seal is represented by a rider on a red horse who unleashes global wars. Peace is now a thing of the past, a memory. The third seal, the black horse, collapses economies through scarcity. No food grows. Famine spreads rapidly. The fourth seal quickly follows, the pale horse. It is named Death. Disease and violence spread like never before. Ahead of these seals, the moon turns blood red, the sun black. A great earthquake ravages the bleeding world. And then, the sound of trumpets. Not a sound of triumph, but one of danger that cannot be avoided, inevitable suffering. What follows is the methodical, multi-stage dismantling of the physical world, where oceans turn to blood, all drinking water is poisoned, and demons are let loose in the realm of the living. Eventually, angels slay the demons, but the world remains broken. The likelihood of survivors is almost zero. The world doesn't end all at once. It ends in stages. The most terrifying part of the rapture wouldn't be divine judgment or apocalyptic beasts. It would be the realization that the end of the world was scheduled from the beginning, and now humanity is trapped inside it. The Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming, USA, is the largest active volcanic site on Earth. It isn't like a cannon waiting to explode, but a huge magma reservoir buried beneath the surface, the largest in the world. It's a reminder that some of the most destructive forces on this planet are hiding in plain sight, until they are impossible to ignore. If a supervolcano like Yellowstone were to erupt, the destruction would not be exclusive to its home state, country, or continent. It would shake the globe, and undoubtedly change it permanently. An eruption on that scale would eject thousands of cubic kilometers of ash and debris into the atmosphere. Over half of North America would be buried under meters of volcanic ash. Neighborhoods wouldn't burn, they would suffocate. Roofs would begin to collapse under the weight, engines fail, lungs would fill up with fine, abrasive dust, possibly damaging victims for life. In the immediate aftermath, millions would be displaced or killed, not by lava, but by air that can no longer be breathed. If you live on the western half of the USA, imagine stepping outside to 12 inches, not of snow, but of volcanic dust, poisonous to our bodies. Within days, ash clouds would circle the entire globe, sunlight would dim, temperatures drop. Crop failures would cascade across continents as growing seasons collapse. This volcanic winter would last years. It's safe to say that the famine, disease, and unrest would spread far beyond the blast zone. Humanity likes to believe that we've conquered natural disasters through technology and prediction. But supervolcanoes exist outside of that illusion. We cannot stop one. We cannot meaningfully slow it. Even early warning would offer little comfort. You can't evacuate continents. Geologically speaking, Yellowstone isn't overdue. It hasn't erupted in 70,000 years, and we don't think it will erupt for at least another few 100,000. But it has erupted before, and it will erupt again. Whether that happens in 100,000 years or in 100 years is ultimately unknowable. These events don't negotiate, and they certainly don't care about civilization. And if multiple supervolcanoes were to erupt within a short span, a scenario rare but not impossible, the effects could compound into a true global collapse, a colder, darker planet, empty skies, silent fields, a slow extinction driven not by fire, but by the absence of sunlight. 50 years ago, technology was simply a novelty. In the world we find ourselves in today, it's embedded in every aspect of our lives. Electricity grids, financial systems, airports, hospitals, communication. They all depend on interconnected digital networks. A cyber war isn't a war in the traditional sense. It isn't fought with ammunition. Instead, code. It involves digital attacks on a nation's computer systems and infrastructure. Instead of targeting soldiers or cities directly, Cyber warfare aims at power grids and government databases, the invisible systems that keep modern society functioning. These attacks can involve hacking, malware, ransomware, or misinformation campaigns. Cyber attacks are common, but they're usually small scale, unsophisticated. But in this scenario, where there's governmental and military resources prioritizing a direct cyber attack on an enemy nation, it could be devastating. In a hypothetical global cyber war, the damage may not always be immediate or visible, but it can be supremely disruptive, shutting down electricity nationwide, like the Russian cyber attack on Ukraine in 2015, paralyzing emergency services, erasing records, and destabilizing entire economies without a single shot being fired. Without access to information, panic would spread faster than facts. Mass hysteria wouldn't come from violence, but from uncertainty. In the chaos, authoritarian control could emerge as governments attempt to restore order. But the world continues. The chances of a cyber war being the main catalyst for the end of civilization seems admittedly unlikely. There's no destruction of buildings or direct casualties, and there's likely many nations in the world that are left unaffected. But the question beneath this scenario isn't whether society would survive, but how much of our lives depend on intangible forces like the internet, of which we no longer know how to live without. The sun is not just a star that we happen to orbit. It's a giver of life, the ultimate provider, an infinite machine of energy and light. But its immense power can be unpredictable, volatile. Sometimes it throws off massive bursts of energy, known as solar flares. Some of these flares release electromagnetic storms that can interact with Earth's magnetic field, inducing disturbances. Humans wouldn't burn under their radiation because the Earth's magnetic field shields us from direct harm. But our technology? Entirely exposed. Satellites, power grids, communication networks, all of it's vulnerable. A strong enough solar flare could shut down electricity over vast regions, even globally. It could scramble banking systems, disable air traffic, and fry electronics. Unlike a cyber war, which is deliberate and targeted, a solar flare is entirely natural, a force of the universe that doesn't discriminate. Humans wouldn't be directly physically harmed, but the world could still fall to its knees. Globalization is stopped in its tracks. Long-distance communication basically ends, as even postal systems rely on digital software to scan and track parcels. Chaos emerges not from malice, but from sheer cosmic chance. There wouldn't be a global fire or radiation sickness. But in a worst-case scenario, a massive solar storm could force a societal hard reset. A temporary return to a world without electricity and without instant communication. We'd have to remember how to live without tech. But ultimately, we would persist. For all the flaws of modern-day society, if there's one thing we've improved upon massively, it's helping humans avoid death. Common illnesses like colds, fevers, and cuts are all but disregarded today as an inconvenience. It's hard to imagine that throughout almost all of human history, these mild traumas could have easily meant an early grave. Before the 20th century, 30 to 50% of all deaths were from infection. Childbirth was extremely dangerous. Surgery was a gamble. A simple scratch could become a death sentence once bacteria found its way inside. In the 1800s, the life expectancy was around 40. And it's always been like that until fairly recently. Today, we have it good. The reason modern life feels so safe by comparison isn't stronger bodies or better hygiene alone. It's antibiotics. Antibiotics are a miracle. They are extremely effective at destroying bacteria within us. However, as most living things are, bacteria is persistent, determined. Every time antibiotics are used, bacteria are placed under pressure. Most die. A few survive, and those survivors pass on resistance. Over decades of overuse, unnecessary prescriptions, incomplete treatments, we've been training bacteria to withstand the very medicines designed to kill them. In a hypothetical, worst-case scenario, bacteria evolve to resist all known antibiotics. It isn't a dramatic moment. We wouldn't even know at first. Treatments would just stop working. An infection that once cleared in days now spreads uncontrollably. Routine surgeries are cancelled. Hospitals, once places of healing, become some of the most dangerous buildings in society. People don't die from spectacular new diseases. They die from pneumonia, from minor wounds that spiral into systemic failure. Humanity quietly reverts to the early 20th century medicine, where reaching 40 or 50 years old was normal, and reaching old age was rare. Luckily, total antibiotic resistance is extremely unlikely in the short term, but it could present an interesting challenge for humanity in the future if nothing is done to slow bacterial evolution. In an unsettling way, this event would be a return to normal. The normal state of human existence for thousands of years, where healing wasn't guaranteed, and every new day came with gratitude, as if it could be the last, because sometimes it really was. There are hundreds of quintillions of planets in the observable universe. Even our home galaxy, the Milky Way, contains an estimated 400 million to 1 billion planets. With numbers that vast, the thought that Earth is the sole habitat for intelligent life seems hard to believe. Almost ridiculous even. Whatever spark that brings life into existence may be rare, but the sheer size of the universe makes rarity an obsolete factor. For example, if 0.001% of planets in the Milky Way were habitable, that's still 10,000 planets ripe for alien life. Therefore, statistically, first contact feels like less of a question of if, and more like when, if it hasn't already occurred. Ancient art and tales from all over the globe seem to depict flying objects and humanoid creatures unexplainable by earthly logic. You tell me what these images look like. Regardless, if another intelligent species were to reach Earth, we could safely assume one thing. They would be more technologically advanced than us. Interstellar travel alone would place them centuries, if not millennia, ahead of human capability, and that imbalance would define the encounter. We would be at their mercy. How exactly are you supposed to fight a fifth-dimensional being in a three-dimensional world? Well, you can't. The fate of humans would lie solely with the intentions of our visitors. And their intentions could range from passive to exploitive to curious to malevolent. Who knows if they would even exhibit anything like human emotion? They might choose to exploit Earth for its resources, viewing the planet as a raw material to be harvested, rather than a home, its population convenient laborers. They might study humanity as a biological curiosity, observing us the way we might observe animals or insects. Or they might choose to never make contact at all, disregarding humanity as too primitive to be worth the journey. The most unsettling part is the uncertainty. Unlike human conflicts, there's no shared ethics, no familiar logic, no common ground. We wouldn't know whether they were benevolent, indifferent, or hostile until it was far too late. And the simple fact that they arrived here first, rather than us reaching them, would mean that control was never ours to begin with. All we can do is hope that when it does happen, when alien life chooses to descend to Earth, they don't treat us the way that we've treated everything we've ever discovered. The oceans are Earth's largest and oldest life support system. They're almost like the lungs of the planet. Millions of years before forests, before animals, before insects, the oceans already regulated the planet's climate and produced oxygen to support the global ecosystem. Today, over 50% of the oxygen we're breathing now comes from microscopic marine life, and yet the oceans are changing fast. Since 1880, the average global temperature has risen by over 1 degree Celsius. When temperatures rise, oceans absorb the majority of the excess heat, beyond the ideal temperatures that all sea life has evolved to live in. At the same time, oceans absorb vast amounts of carbon dioxide, making them more acidic over time. This slow chemical shift might sound harmless, but it directly attacks the foundations of marine life. Coral reefs support roughly a quarter of all marine species, despite covering less than 1% of the ocean floor. When the reefs die, they don't just take fish with them. They take food chains and coastal protection, but the most dangerous part would be that which we do not see. Phytoplankton, the invisible organisms drifting near the ocean's surface, form the base of almost all marine food chains. They are also responsible for massive oxygen production and carbon regulation. As waters warm and acidify, plankton populations destabilize. If they decline significantly, the effects ripple upward. Entire fish species disappear, seabirds vanish, and oxygen production drops, proving problematic for all creatures, not just those who dwell under the water. This wouldn't look like an apocalypse at first. There would be no single day where the oceans die. Instead, the seas would slowly empty. Civilization and the world wouldn't collapse, but it would weaken from the inside out. the planet would become less breathable and less predictable. Recovery would not take years, but centuries, or millennia, that is, if recovery is doable at all. Ultimately, it's impossible to know the full consequences of losing 50% of the oxygen on Earth. The world may not end, but oceanic ecosystem collapse would cause it to slowly suffocate, and eventually, humanity could very well drown. How do most of us see insects? As little more than an inconvenience, as a potential threat, poisonous or disgusting, or maybe we don't see them at all, disregarding them simply as inconsequential, lesser beings. But the truth is, if the insects vanished tomorrow, the world would start to decay like a rotting fruit. Insects are everywhere, yet we barely notice them. Despite their size, they have full, complex lives essential to Earth. They pollinate crops, recycle waste, and sit at the base of all the food chains. They're unbelievably necessary for the balance of nature in every continent except Antarctica. And they're already disappearing. Over the past century, insect populations have declined. Some studies suggest over 40% of insect species are in decline, with many facing extinction within decades. The causes aren't ambiguous. Habitat destruction, pesticide use, invasive species, the list goes on. All these factors combine into a crushing pressure insects simply can't adapt to fast enough. Pollinators would be the first to go. Bees, butterflies, moths, and flies pollinate roughly 75% of global food crops. Without them, plants don't reproduce, seeds fail, agriculture becomes hopeless and inefficient. Humans can try to replace pollination by hand or machine, but doing so at a global scale is economically and logically impossible. But pollination is just the beginning. Insects compose dead matter. Without them, forests would clog with rot. Nutrients would stop cycling through soil. Birds, reptiles, amphibians, and small mammals would lose their primary food source. Entire ecosystems would begin to starve from the bottom up. The world might look like a slow narrowing of life. Fewer species, fewer colors, fewer sounds. The loss of vibrancy would be unmistakable. The silence. Civilization could limp on for a while, with artificial farming and synthetic food production, but the natural, sustainable ways we all relied upon would be gone. And with extinction, there's no do-overs. Modern medicine has come a long way from bloodletting and superstition of the past. We used to prescribe mercury for a cold, heroin for a fever. Today, through years of rigorous trial and error, we now understand the human body at a molecular level, how our immune systems function, how diseases spread, how we recover and heal. But we also know where our biological weaknesses lie. This knowledge has saved countless lives, but in the wrong hands, it could also become a blueprint for exploitation. The most extreme and well-documented biological warfare program in history was Japan's notorious Unit 731. In 1936 to 1945, The Japanese military ran a covert biological warfare program disguised as a medical research facility. Behind closed doors, scientists conducted heinous experiments on civilians and prisoners of war. In some experiments, subjects were infected with the plague, anthrax, and other pathogens to study how disease spreads and how long the human body can endure it. Entire villages were exposed through contaminated food and water, and plague-infected fleas were released on unbeknownst civilians. People were treated merely as data. How long would they survive? How efficiently can a given disease kill? Unit 731's experiments were truly nightmarish. Regardless, they proved something. They proved that humans had the ability to turn biology itself into a weapon, given enough resources, time, and callousness. Modern bioengineering is far more precise than anything available in the 1940s. The question is no longer can disease be engineered, but whether it can be researched, developed, and deployed undetected. Unlike all historical pandemics, this wouldn't be a matter of mutation. It would be intentional design. The most dangerous aspect wouldn't just be its lethality, but other properties meticulously edited for maximum carnage. For example, symptoms could be delayed, allowing it to spread globally before detection. It could evade existing vaccines, overwhelm healthcare systems, and fracture trust as governments scramble to locate the source. Fear would spread alongside the disease. A bioengineered plague would be unlike any outbreak humanity has ever faced. A designer disease curated with purpose. And in that sense, it stands as one of the most realistic end-of-the-world scenarios, yet one the world remains largely unprepared to face. The residue of human civilization doesn't just exist on the Earth's surface, but it extends beyond the stars. As of 2026, over 15,000 satellites circle the planet in low Earth orbit, and are used for all sorts of purposes like high-speed internet, weather forecasting, and military surveillance. We rarely see them, but without them, the modern world would be effectively blind. Kessler syndrome is a theoretical scenario proposed by NASA scientist Donald Kessler in 1978, where he theorized that debris from a single satellite collision may trigger an unstoppable chain reaction. It starts with one impact, which creates fragments of metal, paint, and whatever else the satellite is made of. These shards of metal remain in space, suspended by the gravitational pull of the Earth. Then, these shards strike other objects, which in turn creates more shards which strike other objects, leading to a cascade. Both debris and collisions in low Earth orbit increase exponentially, a violent negative feedback loop. One that cannot be easily cleaned up. After a while, Earth's low orbit becomes a cloud of high-velocity space shrapnel. At orbital speeds, even a fleck of paint can punch through metal. This would leave humanity with a very unique problem. The space around our planet may be unusable for satellites and for travel. No new satellites could be launched without being destroyed on ascent. GPS would fail. Weather prediction would fail. Military warning systems would fail and we would be trapped, cut off from the stars we once dreamt of visiting. Today, we are over 50 years since the Kessler syndrome theory was pronounced, and luckily, we aren't yet in a full runaway cascade. However, the time we live in is a precarious zone, where if we do not manage our risk effectively, the consequences could be dire. Kessler syndrome wouldn't lead to Armageddon by itself, but it would make us vulnerable to it. Imagine a record-breaking tropical storm building momentum in the Atlantic Ocean, completely undetected. No evacuation, no warning. Imagine a future where the resources on Earth are dwindling, while the sky, which was once our escape, is now an impossibly dense, three-dimensional minefield. That is the result of late-stage Kessler syndrome. If there's one thing that humans excel at, it's trying to understand and control things that are completely beyond our comprehension. When the circus lion breaks its shackles and kills the ringmaster, can we really blame the lion? The same could be said about particle accelerators. They are some of the most complex machines ever built. The Large Hadron Collider is the apex of these, a 27-kilometer ring hidden under Geneva, Switzerland, designed to smash subatomic particles together at near light speed. The conditions that are observed there have seldom been seen since the formation of the universe itself. Despite its intimidating reputation, it has an almost perfect safety record thus far. In fact, there has only ever been one notable incident. In 2008, shortly after the Large Hadron Collider was first powered on, a faulty electrical connection caused a massive failure. Superconducting magnets were damaged, and tons of liquid helium leaked into the tunnel. But luckily, no one was hurt. Technically, therefore, particle accelerators boast a 100% human survival rate. But the fear surrounding them has never been about explosions or radiation. It's about what they might create. One theoretical concern is the production of a man-made black hole. According to modern physics, if such a black hole were ever formed, it would be unimaginably small and unstable, vanishing almost instantly. But this assurance is based on theory and our current limited understanding of black holes. Theory has been wrong before. Hypothetically, if a black hole was somehow created large enough to persist for more than an instant, the outcome would be absolute. There would be no impact, no warning. One moment, reality exists. The next, it simply doesn't. Matter would be consumed indiscriminately, Earth erased almost as if it had never been. What makes this scenario especially disturbing is how unknowable it is. We have no idea what happens inside a black hole, but the theories are endless. From total annihilation to passage into an entirely different universe. If such an event occurred, there would be no aftermath and no struggle. That's why this entry sits deep on the iceberg. Not because it's likely, but because if it ever did happen, it wouldn't look like the end of the world. it wouldn't look like anything at all. After all, who would be left to do the looking? The grey goo theory is a hypothetical end-of-the-world scenario rooted in nanotechnology. Man-made machines so tiny that they cannot be seen with the naked eye. Although nanotechnologies already exist all around us in today's world, the type which would be responsible for grey goo remain theoretical. The term grey goo was popularized in the 1980s by engineer Eric Drexler, who in his book Engines of Creation imagined a future where self-replicating nanomachines could build almost anything, atom by atom. In theory, these machines would be programmed to take raw materials from their environment and copy themselves endlessly. One machine becomes two. Two become four. Exponential growth on a scale too small to see. According to Drexler, the nightmare begins if or when that process escapes control. In his book, he wrote, "Imagine such a replicator floating in a bottle of chemicals, making copies of itself. The first replicator assembles a copy in 1,000 seconds. The two replicators then build two more in the next 1,000 seconds. The four build another four, and then the 8 build another 8. At the end of 10 hours, there are not 36 new replicators, but over 68 billion. In less than a day, they would weigh a ton. In less than 2 days, they would outweigh the Earth. In another 4 hours, they would exceed the mass of the Sun and all the planets combined, if the bottle of chemicals hadn't run dry long before." Humans struggle to understand exponential growth. We think in straight lines, while machines can multiply in curves. What begins in a controlled environment can quickly become a runaway process, accelerating beyond human reaction time, and could start to consume beyond where it was meant to. And by that point, trillions of nanobots become septillions of nanobots. And soon, every atom on Earth is replaced by an insatiable, expanding, colorless sludge. At least hypothetically. What makes this scenario uniquely terrifying isn't just speed, but its discreteness. Unlike nuclear war or pandemics, grey goo offers no visible warning. Most of us wouldn't recognize a thing was wrong until it was already over. That said, most scientists consider true grey goo unlikely. Modern nanotechnology is not yet close to creating autonomous, self-replicating machines. And when such a thing does arrive, we'd expect contingency plans like kill switches implemented exactly to avoid this scenario. But history has shown that innovation and progress can be dangerous. It's frightening because it represents a new category of existential risk, one where humanity loses control not through war, but through hubris. A future where the end arrives with perfect efficiency. A planet consumed, left unrecognizable by our hand. Generally, we like to think of physics as predictable. Always calculable, and something to be depended upon. After all, our entire civilization is built on the assumption that matter will remain constant, that an apple will always be an apple, and that a snake will always be a snake. But that assumption may not hold true everywhere in the universe. In places far beyond Earth, under pressures we can barely model, matter behaves very differently. Inside neutron stars, for example, gravity crushes atoms so completely that electrons and protons are completely reorganized. Under these extreme conditions, matter is thought to rearrange itself into something even more stable than the nuclear matter of which our entire planet is composed of. This state is fittingly called strange matter. The doomsday scenario is simple. If strange matter is truly more stable, then any contact between it and anything on Earth could convert our matter into more strange matter, causing an unstoppable chain reaction. A single strange matter particle introduced to Earth would be enough. The planet wouldn't burn or shatter. It would transform. The ground beneath us would silently change. The air, the ocean, the animals, humans, all rewritten into a denser, alien state of matter, with no warning and no time to react. Perhaps consciousness would simply cease to exist in a moment. Or perhaps we would remain frozen on Earth like stone statues, unable to move our impossibly dense and stable bodies. Strange matter doesn't break the laws of physics. In fact, it obeys them perfectly. That's what makes it so terrifying. If, by some cosmic coincidence, an asteroid were to cross light years of space carrying just a single strange particle, we would all be doomed. Earth would remain intact, just unrecognizable, a perfectly stable, lifeless sphere drifting through space, not destroyed, but converted. For as long as the universe has existed, it has followed rules. Patterns so consistent that we base our entire existences on their reliability. The sun will come up in the morning. Time moves forward. Cause precedes effect. These aren't beliefs. They're the conditions that make thought possible at all. But what if these conditions aren't as permanent as they seem? What if the laws that govern the universe can be bent not by intelligence, but by spontaneous natural events beyond our understanding? A cosmic rupture refers to a fracture in the structure of space-time itself. Not an impact, but a tear. A discontinuity where the rules that assert reality become warped or snapped into pieces. Dimensions folding over themselves in a mess of energy and matter. A place where physics simply stops agreeing with itself. A place where nothing makes sense. We can try to hypothesize what might cause such an event. Dark matter, wormholes, extreme quantum fluctuations, but ultimately, we are ignorant. Our brains evolved to track prey, recognize faces, and survive on a rock orbiting a star. They were never meant to intuit the mechanics of reality. If a cosmic rupture is possible, it may be governed by principles so abstract that even our most advanced mathematics pale in comparison. And if such an event did occur, it wouldn't need to happen here. It could originate light years away, expanding invisibly through the cosmos, indifferent to what it erases along the way. Our solar system wouldn't be targeted. It would be incidental. A speck of dust caught in an earthquake. One moment, life on Earth is normal. The next, the rules that allow atoms to bind together and time to flow are ripped out of reality. An instantaneous dismantling of every building we have ever fashioned, every cell in our bodies, and every atom on Earth. And yet, still, on a universal scale, nothing would change. A mountain walked, or stumbled. H.P. Lovecraft. For as long as human civilization has existed, we have told stories of impossible, ancient beings, gods, demons, entities so vast and alien that they blur the line between mythos and memory. Across countless cultures separated by oceans and ages, the same idea repeats itself. Humanity does not own the world. Something far older sleeps deep beneath it. What if there's a reason these same stories emerge throughout history? Maybe the human mind longs for what it cannot understand, and so invents myth to satisfy that urge. Or maybe, just maybe, something ancient and alive was once glimpsed, briefly, and never understood. Human language fractures when it tries to describe the truly alien, so we dress it in metaphor. This is the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Egyptian Book of the Dead. If something vast and incomprehensible did exist, myth might be the only way it could be processed by our primitive, primate minds. So let us suspend disbelief. A shadow rises or descends from the abyss. This wouldn't be an invasion, but a revelation, appearing behind the curtain. A mass moving where mass should not move. Geometry bending at its presence. Seismographs stutter. Oceans pull back without reason. Satellites fall from the sky unexplainably, as if the world itself begins to malfunction in the proximity of something so profoundly wrong. The thing would not announce itself. It would be felt. Its mere existence would rupture every framework we use to understand reality. Science, religion, and authority all collapse into irrelevance. we would be humbled in a way that humanity never has before, not just through destruction, but through recognition of our cosmic insignificance. True eldritch horror, not in fiction, but here, in reality. And if we have awakened it, if it is staring back at us, then we can be sure of one thing. It is already far too late for us. Up until now, every scenario we've explored has shared one thing in common: uncertainty. They can be survived, maybe even avoided. They depend on chance, on intelligence, on mistakes, on nature, and on forces we don't fully understand. But beyond all of that, beneath every layer of guesswork, there are endings that require no speculation at all. Events written into the structure of the universe itself. In roughly 5 billion years, the sun will exhaust the hydrogen that allows it to shine. One day, it will swell outward, expanding into a red giant star, absorbing everything in its path. Mercury will be the first planet to go. Venus will shortly follow. And then, our home, Earth, will either be consumed entirely or rendered sterile, its oceans boiled away, its surface stripped of life. It goes without saying that no creature could survive this event. But maybe we won't be here by then. Maybe we'll escape. But the planet itself will not. And even if we do leave, even if humanity spreads to the stars, the universe offers no permanent refuge. Here we are. We've made it to the end of the universe. As time stretches towards infinity, energy will disperse. Stars will begin to burn out, one by one. Their fuel spreads so thinly across the cosmos that there are no reactions left to be had. No more processes, no more motion. If our descendants are still around in this future, against all odds, they might witness the final star dim in the sky. And despite their perseverance, despite everything, they would not escape the heat death. Every story ends here. Not because something went wrong, but because this is how existence ends. The universe will have simply run its course, as all things do. Nothing lasts forever. Thank you for watching.